It was a regular afternoon in the small, quiet town of Maplewood. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the streets, where people went about their usual routines. The town wasn't big, and on a normal day, nothing much happened. But everyone in town knew Sergeant Lisa Hayes, the police officer who took her job seriously. Lisa was dedicated, always on alert, and nothing escaped her watchful eyes. She believed that her job was to protect the town, and she did it with a strong sense of duty. She liked to say that she could spot trouble a mile away, and her coworkers knew she wasn't joking. Lisa's sharp instincts had led her to solve a fair number of cases, and she took pride in being able to read people well. This particular afternoon, Lisa was out on her regular patrol. She drove slowly through the streets, her eyes moving from left to right, observing everything and everyone. To Lisa, every small detail mattered. If someone looked out of place or seemed suspicious, she noticed right away. It was part of what made her a good cop, and she was confident in her skills. She was careful, cautious, and in her mind, ready for anything. But as she was driving down Main Street, something, or rather, someone, caught her attention. Across the street, inside the cozy little coffee shop called Brews, Lisa saw a woman sitting alone by the window. The woman seemed calm and relaxed, sipping her coffee as she looked down at some papers on the table in front of her. She was dressed simply, in a plain sweater and a scarf around her neck. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore no flashy jewelry or bright colors. Everything about her seemed quiet, almost too quiet, and Lisa's instincts kicked in. There was nothing obviously unusual about the woman, but something made Lisa pause. Maybe it was the way the woman seemed so lost in her work, paying no attention to anyone around her, or maybe it was just Lisa's habit of being overly cautious. To Lisa, this woman was a stranger, and strangers always made her a little wary. After all, Maplewood was a small town where almost everyone knew each other. If there was a face Lisa didn't recognize, she took notice. Lisa parked her patrol car across the street and continued to observe the woman from a distance. She could see the woman's hands moving slowly as she turned the pages, her expression serious and focused. Whatever she was reading, it seemed important. Lisa squinted, trying to get a better look at the papers on the table, but they were too far away to make out any details. Still, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woman seemed too calm, too composed, almost as if she was hiding something. And to someone like Lisa, that was a reason to be on alert. After a few minutes of watching, Lisa decided she needed a closer look. She didn't like to leave things to chance, and she certainly didn't want to ignore her instincts. If this woman was a stranger, it was Lisa's job to make sure she wasn't a threat. Besides, Lisa prided herself on keeping the town safe, and she wasn't about to let someone go unnoticed. Inside the coffee shop, Ava King sat quietly by the window, unaware that she had caught the attention of the town's most vigilant officer. Ava was focused on the papers in front of her, going over details and making notes in the margins. She wore a calm expression, her posture relaxed yet poised. There was a quiet confidence about her, a sense of inner strength that made her seem at ease in any situation. To anyone watching, Ava might have looked like an ordinary woman enjoying her afternoon coffee, but there was something more to her that no one in Maplewood could see, yet. Ava was a woman of purpose, someone who held a position of respect and power, though she didn't wear it on her sleeve. In fact, she preferred to stay out of the spotlight, letting her actions speak louder than words. She believed in justice, fairness, and equality, and she had spent years working hard to make a difference. But here, in this small town, she was just a face among many, blending into the background. To the people of Maplewood, she was simply another customer at Brews, just someone passing through. But Ava's quiet presence held a sense of dignity that might have hinted at her true nature to anyone paying close attention. There was something about the way she carried herself, the calm way she sipped her coffee, the way she studied the pages in front of her with such focus. It was as if she was used to making big decisions, to having a voice that mattered. But for now, she was simply Ava, a woman enjoying a peaceful afternoon, content to be left alone. However, Lisa saw Ava differently. She didn't see the calm dignity or the quiet confidence. To Lisa, Ava was an unknown, a stranger in a town where strangers were rare. Lisa's job had trained her to notice the little things, and right now, every small detail about Ava seemed suspicious. The way Ava didn't look up, the way she seemed so focused on her papers, as if she had something to hide. It all felt wrong to Lisa, and in Lisa's mind, it was her duty to find out more. Lisa took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped out of her patrol car. She adjusted her badge, making sure it was visible, and walked across the street toward the coffee shop. She was determined to find out who this woman was and why she was here. Her footsteps were steady, her gaze focused, and as she reached the door, she felt a familiar sense of purpose. This was what she was trained for, after all, keeping her town safe. Inside, the coffee shop was warm and filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. A few customers sat scattered at tables, chatting softly or reading, enjoying the calm atmosphere. Ava continued to sit by the window, seemingly oblivious to the world around her. But as Lisa approached, Ava finally looked up, her eyes meeting Lisa's with a calm, steady gaze. There was no fear in Ava's eyes, no hint of nervousness. She simply looked at Lisa with a quiet curiosity, as if wondering why a police officer was approaching her. Lisa was taken aback by the woman's calmness, but she quickly recovered, putting on her professional face. "Good afternoon, Mom," Lisa said, her tone polite but firm. "I'm Sergeant Hayes, and I'd like to ask you a few questions." Ava smiled gently, nodding her head. "Of course, officer," she replied, her voice smooth and respectful. "Is there something I can help you with?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, thrown off by Ava's calm demeanor. She had expected the woman to be more nervous, perhaps even defensive, but Ava remained composed. This only made Lisa more suspicious, though she kept her thoughts to herself. "I noticed you're new around here," Lisa said, keeping her voice steady. "May I ask what brings you to Maplewood?" Ava's smile didn't waver. "I'm just passing through," she said simply. "I had some paperwork to go over, and I thought this seemed like a nice place to stop and get some coffee." Lisa raised an eyebrow, glancing at the papers on the table. "That's a lot of paperwork for someone just passing through," she remarked, trying to keep her tone casual but firm. Ava nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, it is. My work requires a lot of reading and reviewing. I often have to take my work with me wherever I go." Lisa felt a flicker of frustration. Ava's answers were polite and straightforward, yet there was something about her calmness that unsettled Lisa. It was as if Ava knew something Lisa didn't, a hidden piece of information that kept her one step ahead. The silence between them grew, each woman holding her ground. Finally, Ava looked back down at her papers, her calm demeanor unshaken. For her, this was just another encounter, nothing more. But for Lisa, this was the beginning of a mystery, a puzzle she couldn't ignore. Lisa straightened up, realizing that she wasn't going to get any answers just by standing there. But in her mind, this wasn't over. She would keep an eye on Ava King. After all, she was a stranger, and in a town like Maplewood, strangers didn't just come and go without a reason. And so, as Lisa left the coffee shop, a quiet tension lingered in the air. Little did she know that this simple encounter would set off a chain of events that would change everything she thought she knew about her job, about herself, and about the quiet woman by the window who was far more than she seemed. It was a calm afternoon, the sun still shining warmly over the quiet streets of Maplewood. Sergeant Lisa Hayes was doing her usual rounds, keeping an eye on everything around her. As she drove through the familiar streets, she watched people going about their routines. Most faces were familiar to her since Maplewood was a small town. She knew who lived where, who owned which store, and who was visiting friends or family. This small town was her responsibility, and Lisa took her duty seriously. As she continued her patrol, something caught her eye. She slowed down and noticed a woman sitting by the window of the local coffee shop, Maple Brews. The woman looked calm, almost too calm, Lisa thought. She was alone, sipping a coffee, and every now and then, she would glance down at some papers in front of her. She didn't look nervous or hurried, but there was something about her that made Lisa pause. She had an air of quiet confidence, something that was unusual for a stranger in town. Lisa frowned, feeling a slight unease that she couldn't quite explain. The woman wasn't doing anything wrong, but she didn't look like she belonged, either. Lisa's instincts were sharp, and something about this woman made her suspicious. She wasn't dressed like a tourist, nor did she seem like someone passing through. She looked focused, as if she was there for a reason. Lisa parked her patrol car across the street, deciding to watch the woman for a few minutes. From a distance, she observed the way the woman moved her hands as she shuffled through her papers, the way she sipped her coffee slowly, calmly. There was nothing overtly suspicious about her actions, but Lisa felt a nagging sense of doubt. Maybe it was just her habit of being overly cautious, or perhaps it was her tendency to judge people a bit too quickly. But in her mind, it was always better to be safe than sorry. As she watched, Lisa began to feel a strange sense of irritation building up inside her. Here was a stranger in her town, looking so calm and collected, as if she owned the place. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that this woman's calmness was a kind of quiet defiance, a way of saying, "I don't need to explain myself." It bothered her, though she couldn't exactly say why. Finally, Lisa decided she couldn't just sit and watch anymore. She would go over and introduce herself, maybe ask a few questions to get a better sense of who this woman was. After all, it was her job to know what was happening in her town. With a firm nod to herself, she stepped out of her patrol car, adjusted her uniform, and crossed the street with determined steps. As she walked into Maple Brews, a few customers glanced up, recognizing the town's well-known officer. Lisa gave them a brief nod, her eyes immediately returning to the woman by the window. The woman hadn't noticed her yet. She was still focused on her papers, her fingers tracing lines on the page, as if she were studying something very important. Lisa approached the woman's table, her posture straight and her face serious. She wanted to make sure her authority was clear. Standing next to the table, she cleared her throat, causing the woman to look up, slightly startled by the interruption. "Excuse me, ma'am," Lisa began, her voice firm and controlled. "What brings you here today?" The woman looked up at her with a calm expression, her eyes meeting Lisa's without any sign of fear or discomfort. She seemed surprised, but not intimidated. Lisa wasn't sure what she had expected, but this calmness threw her off a bit. "Oh, good afternoon, officer," the woman said politely, offering a small, respectful smile. "I'm just here for some work. I thought this would be a nice place to stop and get some coffee." Lisa narrowed her eyes slightly, trying to gauge the woman's tone. There was nothing defensive or evasive in her answer, but somehow that only made Lisa more suspicious. The woman's calm, respectful tone didn't fit the reaction Lisa had expected. She had thought the woman would be more nervous or at least a bit apologetic. But this woman seemed perfectly at ease, almost as if she didn't feel the need to explain herself. "What kind of work?" Lisa asked, her tone a bit sharper now. She glanced at the papers on the table, trying to make out any details. From where she stood, all she could see were words and numbers, but nothing specific enough to give her any clues. The woman's calm smile remained as she replied, "I'm reviewing some documents for my job. I travel a lot, so I often stop at places like this to catch up on paperwork." Lisa frowned, feeling a small surge of irritation. The woman's answer was polite, but it was also vague. It told her nothing specific, nothing that could ease her suspicions. Lisa felt as if the woman was deliberately avoiding giving her any real information. She knew it was probably her own bias speaking, but something about the woman's tone made her feel like she was being brushed off, as if the woman thought she didn't owe her an explanation. And what job might that be? Lisa pressed, her voice growing a bit more assertive. She wanted to make it clear that she wasn't just here for small talk. She wanted answers. The woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes held a flicker of something. Maybe amusement, maybe patience. She looked directly at Lisa, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I work in government," the woman replied simply, her tone calm but firm. She didn't elaborate, and her answer was so simple that it almost felt like a challenge, as if she was testing Lisa's reaction. Lisa's suspicion grew. "Government work," she repeated, her voice laced with doubt. She couldn't help but feel that this woman was playing a game with her, giving her just enough information to keep her guessing, but not enough to satisfy her curiosity. "Yes," the woman replied, her tone remaining polite. "It's mostly paperwork and meetings. Nothing very exciting." Lisa stared at her, trying to read her expression, but the woman's face gave nothing away. Her calm, composed demeanor only made Lisa more determined to get answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was hiding something, that there was more to her story than she was letting on. "Mind if I ask where you're from?" Lisa asked, keeping her voice steady but firm. She was determined to find out as much as she could, even if it meant asking more personal questions. The woman gave a small, polite nod. "Not at all. I'm originally from here, from this state, but I travel often for my work." Lisa felt another surge of irritation. The woman's answers were so careful, so controlled, as if she had rehearsed them. It was almost as if she knew exactly how to answer without giving away too much. This only made Lisa more suspicious, and she struggled to keep her frustration in check. "Well, it's not every day we get visitors who work in government," Lisa said, her tone laced with skepticism. "What brings you to our little town?" The woman looked at her calmly, her eyes steady. "I'm just passing through. I have a few stops to make, and I thought Maplewood would be a nice, quiet place to get some work done." Lisa felt the tension in the air growing, and she could sense that a few of the other customers were watching them closely. There was a silence in the coffee shop now, a kind of quiet curiosity, as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Lisa's questions didn't seem to end. Each question was sharper, her tone more direct, as if she was digging for something Ava was hiding. But Ava, with a calm face and steady eyes, continued to answer each question without complaint. Her responses were polite and straightforward, but she never gave more information than what Lisa had asked for. She seemed determined not to share any unnecessary details. This only made Lisa more frustrated. She felt like Ava was avoiding her questions on purpose, giving only the bare minimum. In Lisa's eyes, this calmness seemed almost arrogant, as if Ava was challenging her authority. Lisa couldn't stand it. She felt as though Ava was mocking her, sitting there with that steady, unbothered expression, not showing a single hint of fear or nervousness. It made Lisa feel as if Ava was hiding something important. After several rounds of questions, Lisa decided to step things up. She wasn't going to leave without knowing exactly who this woman was and what she was doing in her town. So, in a firm tone, she asked, "I'm going to need to see your identification, Mom." Ava didn't flinch. She calmly reached for her purse, pulled out her ID, and handed it over to Lisa. Her hand was steady, her face still calm, as if this request was nothing more than a simple formality. Lisa took the ID and glanced down at it. The name read Ava King, and next to it was a clear, professional photo of Ava, dressed in business attire, looking exactly as calm and composed as she did now. Lisa read the details carefully, her eyes scanning every word, every number, looking for something, anything, that might be out of place. She wanted to find some clue, something that would explain why this woman was here and why she was acting the way she was. But there was nothing unusual about the ID. The information seemed correct, matching everything Ava had said. There was no reason to doubt its validity, but Lisa couldn't shake her suspicion. She looked up from the ID, her eyes narrowing slightly as she inspected Ava's face, as if trying to catch a flicker of dishonesty or discomfort. But Ava only returned her gaze steadily, unflinching. Still holding the ID, Lisa decided to dig deeper. "And what exactly is your business here, Miss King?" she asked, her tone more accusatory than curious. Ava sighed softly, the first hint of frustration showing on her face, but she kept her voice calm. "As I mentioned, officer, I'm here for work. I have a few stops to make in this state, and I needed a quiet place to review some documents." Her answer was straightforward, but Lisa's doubt only grew. There was something about Ava's tone, the way she spoke with such patience, that made Lisa feel as if she was being outsmarted. Lisa felt a tightening in her chest, a feeling of being one-upped, and she didn't like it one bit. The people around them began to notice the growing tension. A few customers glanced over their newspapers or paused mid-sip, their eyes flickering toward Ava and Lisa. The once cozy coffee shop grew quieter, the usual murmur of conversation fading as people took in the scene. Lisa's frustration was now visible on her face. She glanced down at the ID again, as if hoping a second look would reveal some hidden detail she had missed. But it was all there, clear and legitimate. Even so, Lisa wasn't ready to back down. She looked back at Ava, her face hardening as she tried a different angle. "This ID," she said slowly, as if doubting its authenticity, "seems too clean, almost too perfect." Ava raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise flashing in her eyes. "I assure you, officer, it's as real as it gets." Lisa's doubt was unwavering. "I've seen plenty of fake IDs in my time, ma'am, and some of the best ones look real, just like this." At this, Ava's calm demeanor started to shift, just slightly. Her lips tightened, and she let out a slow, patient sigh. She looked Lisa directly in the eyes, her gaze firm and clear. "Officer," she began, her tone now carrying a hint of authority, "are you implying that my identification is fake?" The firmness in her voice made Lisa pause, but only for a moment. She felt challenged, and the last thing she wanted was to appear weak or uncertain in front of this woman. Her pride as an officer wouldn't allow her to back down now. "I'm saying it's possible," Lisa replied, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. "I have to be careful with strangers, especially those passing through. It's my job to keep this town safe." Ava's patience was clearly wearing thin, but she remained composed. She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "I understand that, officer, but I've complied with everything you've asked, and I have nothing to hide." Despite her words, Lisa's mind raced with doubt. She didn't know what it was, but she felt something was off, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Her suspicion had taken root, and she wasn't willing to let it go. The silence between them grew tense, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Ava spoke again, her voice carrying a calm but unmistakable firmness. "Officer," she said slowly, each word clear and deliberate, "are you finished?" The question took Lisa by surprise. It was such a simple question, but the way Ava said it made it feel like a statement, as if she was calling an end to the interrogation. Lisa felt a flash of irritation. This woman wasn't supposed to be questioning her authority. She was supposed to comply, to answer, to respect the badge and follow orders. But Ava's calmness, her quiet confidence, seemed like a silent challenge. Lisa's grip on Ava's ID tightened slightly. Her pride as an officer, her need to be in control, wouldn't let her back down. She was determined to get answers, even if it meant pushing further. "I'll decide when I'm finished," Lisa replied, her voice cool and controlled. The air in the coffee shop grew tense as Ava, who had stayed calm and patient until now, slowly rose from her seat. Her face, usually gentle and calm, was now filled with a quiet but powerful determination. She looked directly at Lisa, her expression serious, her gaze steady and unflinching. Everyone in the coffee shop could feel the shift. Something important was about to happen, and all eyes turned to watch. "You want to know who I am?" Ava asked, her voice clear and steady, each word carrying a weight that seemed to fill the room. Lisa felt a jolt of surprise at Ava's sudden change in tone. The confidence in Ava's voice was different this time. It was not just calm or polite. It was strong, unyielding, and filled with authority. Lisa had never expected this from the woman she had been questioning, and for the first time, she felt a small flicker of doubt. She looked at Ava, momentarily taken aback by the intensity of her gaze. Ava's eyes swept around the room briefly before coming back to rest on Lisa. The room had fallen silent, every single customer watching the scene unfold with bated breath. The barista behind the counter froze mid-movement, a coffee cup still in her hand, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. People who had been busy reading newspapers or checking their phones now leaned forward, their attention fully on Ava and Lisa. "I am Senator Ava King," Ava announced, her voice firm and unwavering, letting each word sink in. For a moment, it was as if time had stopped. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, as the realization spread through the coffee shop. Senator. Ava was a state senator. This woman, whom Lisa had questioned, doubted, and suspected, was someone of great importance and authority. Lisa felt her face go pale as the words registered in her mind. She looked down at the ID in her hand, now seeing it in a completely different light. The name matched. The name she had read earlier but hadn't truly registered. Ava King. Now it all clicked into place. Lisa's mind raced, her thoughts tangled with disbelief and regret. How had she not realized? She had been questioning a senator as if she were just some random person, as if she were a potential suspect. The silence in the coffee shop was thick and heavy. No one dared to move or speak, as if even the smallest sound might shatter the tension that filled the room. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she continued to stare at the ID, the reality of her actions hitting her like a wave. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at Ava, whose expression had shifted from patience to quiet, controlled authority. The other patrons in the coffee shop exchanged glances, their eyes wide with shock and curiosity. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as people recognized the weight of what had just happened. "Senator," one person murmured, barely above a whisper. Another leaned over to their companion, eyebrows raised in surprise. Did she just say she's a senator? The disbelief in their voices mirrored the feelings that were now rushing through Lisa's mind. Ava's composed authority commanded respect, and it was clear that she was now the one in control. Lisa felt the power dynamic shift in a way that left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. She was no longer the one asking the questions, no longer the one holding authority. Instead, she was the one under scrutiny, as everyone in the room watched her, waiting to see what she would do next. Lisa's throat went dry as she struggled to find the words. She felt a flush of embarrassment and regret as she realized the depth of her mistake. The pride and certainty she had felt just moments ago had vanished, replaced by a deep sense of discomfort. She had questioned this woman, doubted her, and treated her with suspicion, all because she hadn't taken the time to truly understand who she was speaking to. Lisa's grip on Ava's ID tightened slightly. Her pride as an officer, her need to be in control, wouldn't let her back down. She was determined to get answers, even if it meant pushing further. "I'll decide when I'm finished," Lisa replied, her voice cool and controlled. The air in the coffee shop grew tense as Ava, who had stayed calm and patient until now, slowly rose from her seat. Her face, usually gentle and calm, was now filled with a quiet but powerful determination. She looked directly at Lisa, her expression serious, her gaze steady and unflinching. Everyone in the coffee shop could feel the shift. Something important was about to happen, and all eyes turned to watch. "You want to know who I am?" Ava asked, her voice clear and steady, each word carrying a weight that seemed to fill the room. Lisa felt a jolt of surprise at Ava's sudden change in tone. The confidence in Ava's voice was different this time. It was not just calm or polite. It was strong, unyielding, and filled with authority. Lisa had never expected this from the woman she had been questioning, and for the first time, she felt a small flicker of doubt. She looked at Ava, momentarily taken aback by the intensity of her gaze. Ava's eyes swept around the room briefly before coming back to rest on Lisa. The room had fallen silent, every single customer watching the scene unfold with bated breath. The barista behind the counter froze mid-movement, a coffee cup still in her hand, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. People who had been busy reading newspapers or checking their phones now leaned forward, their attention fully on Ava and Lisa. "I am Senator Ava King," Ava announced, her voice firm and unwavering, letting each word sink in. For a moment, it was as if time had stopped. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, as the realization spread through the coffee shop. Senator. Ava was a state senator. This woman, whom Lisa had questioned, doubted, and suspected, was someone of great importance and authority. Lisa felt her face go pale as the words registered in her mind. She looked down at the ID in her hand, now seeing it in a completely different light. The name matched. The name she had read earlier, but hadn't truly registered. Ava King. Now, it all clicked into place. Lisa's mind raced, her thoughts tangled with disbelief and regret. How had she not realized? She had been questioning the senator as if she were just some random person, as if she were a potential suspect. The silence in the coffee shop was thick and heavy. No one dared to move or speak, as if even the smallest sound might shatter the tension that filled the room. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she continued to stare at the ID, the reality of her actions hitting her like a wave. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at Ava, whose expression had shifted from patience to quiet, controlled authority. The other patrons in the coffee shop exchanged glances, their eyes wide with shock and curiosity. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as people recognized the weight of what had just happened. "Senator," one person murmured, barely above a whisper. Another leaned over to their companion, eyebrows raised in surprise. Did she just say she's a senator? The disbelief in their voices mirrored the feelings that were now rushing through Lisa's mind. Ava's composed authority commanded respect, and it was clear that she was now the one in control. Lisa felt the power dynamic shift in a way that left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. She was no longer the one asking the questions, no longer the one holding authority. Instead, she was the one under scrutiny, as everyone in the room watched her, waiting to see what she would do next. Lisa's throat went dry as she struggled to find the words. She felt a flush of embarrassment and regret as she realized the depth of her mistake. The pride and certainty she had felt just moments ago had vanished, replaced by a deep sense of discomfort. She had questioned this woman, doubted her, and treated her with suspicion, all because she hadn't taken the time to truly understand who she was speaking to. I didn't realize," Lisa stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She could feel her cheeks growing hot as the reality of her actions settled in. The confident, authoritative tone she had used earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost shaky voice. Ava's gaze softened slightly, but there was still a firmness in her expression. She took a deep breath, as if deciding whether to address the situation further. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable strength. "I understand that you have a job to do, officer," Ava said, her tone controlled but slightly pointed. "But there is a way to ask questions, a way to treat people with respect and dignity." Lisa felt a pang of guilt at Ava's words. She knew that Ava was right. Her own biases and assumptions had clouded her judgment, and she had allowed her suspicions to guide her actions without taking the time to consider that Ava might not be what she assumed. She glanced down, feeling the weight of her mistake, knowing that everyone in the room could see her discomfort. Ava continued, her voice steady, addressing not only Lisa but the entire room. "I hold a position that requires me to travel and meet people, to work on issues that affect our communities," she said, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the coffee shop patrons, many of whom were listening intently, some nodding slightly in understanding. "But that position does not mean I should be treated with suspicion just because I am unknown in this town." There was a quiet strength in Ava's words, a sense of purpose that resonated with those listening. The people around her seemed to understand what she was saying, nodding in agreement, their eyes filled with respect for this woman who had spoken up not only for herself, but for anyone who had ever been unfairly judged. Lisa swallowed hard, feeling a mix of shame and regret. She wanted to apologize, to explain that she hadn't meant to be disrespectful, but the words caught in her throat. She knew that an apology wouldn't undo what had happened. She had made assumptions, allowed her biases to take over, and now she was facing the consequences in front of a room full of people. The barista, who had been frozen behind the counter, finally moved, setting down the coffee cup she had been holding. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of admiration and awe as she looked at Ava. She, like everyone else in the coffee shop, had witnessed the power and dignity with which Ava had handled the situation. Ava took a step back, her gaze still focused on Lisa. Her voice softened, but her words held a sense of finality. "I hope this will serve as a reminder, officer," she said, her tone firm but not unkind, "that respect should be given to everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Lisa nodded, her eyes downcast, unable to meet Ava's gaze. She felt the full weight of Ava's words, understanding that this was more than just a lesson in humility. It was a reminder of the responsibility she held as a law enforcement officer. She was supposed to protect and serve, to treat people with respect, not suspicion. And today, she had failed in that duty. The coffee shop remained silent as Ava collected her things, sliding her papers back into her bag with calm, deliberate movements. She placed her coffee cup on the counter, nodding politely to the barista, who gave her a small, respectful smile in return. As Ava turned to leave, she glanced back at Lisa one last time, her expression unreadable but filled with a quiet strength. The room watched her as she walked toward the door, her steps steady and confident. She carried herself with the dignity of someone who knew her worth, someone who wouldn't let anyone, not even an officer, treat her with anything less than respect. The whispers started again as soon as Ava left the coffee shop, filling the air with a mixture of shock, admiration, and disbelief. Some patrons murmured words of support, others expressed their amazement, and a few discussed the powerful way Ava had handled the situation. The barista behind the counter exchanged a knowing look with a customer nearby, both of them nodding in agreement. Lisa remained standing in place, her face pale, her thoughts racing. She felt a deep sense of humility as she realized the extent of her mistake. Ava King wasn't just a stranger in town. She was a respected senator, a woman of strength and dignity who had handled the situation with far more grace than Lisa had shown her. In that moment, Lisa knew she had learned a lesson she would not soon forget. This experience would stay with her, reminding her to look beyond first impressions, to treat people with the respect they deserved, and to never let her biases cloud her judgment again. The coffee shop slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of what had just happened lingered in the air. The patrons who had witnessed the exchange would tell others about the day Senator Ava King visited Maplewood and how she had left a lasting impression on everyone in the room. And as Lisa finally turned to leave, her mind was filled with thoughts of humility, reflection, and the quiet, powerful lesson she had just learned from the woman she had once underestimated. As the reality of her actions sank in, Lisa felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. She realized she had made a serious mistake, and there was no way to take it back. Her hands trembled slightly, and her mind raced as she tried to think of something to say, some way to explain herself, to soften what had just happened. But words failed her. Her thoughts felt jumbled, and for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt completely lost. She was usually so confident in her role, so sure of her instincts. But now, standing in front of Senator Ava King, all that confidence had crumbled. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to find the right words, something that might fix this. "I didn't realize. I didn't mean." Lisa stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She searched Ava's face for any sign of forgiveness, any hint of understanding, but Ava's expression remained calm and unreadable. She didn't seem angry, but there was a firmness in her gaze that made it clear she would not be easily swayed by excuses. Ava simply looked at her, calm yet strong, her eyes steady as she waited for Lisa to finish. After a long pause, Ava finally spoke, her voice soft but carrying a sense of authority that couldn't be ignored. "It's officers like you who remind me why I do what I do," Ava said, her tone calm but with a hint of disappointment. "I work to bring fairness and respect to everyone, no matter who they are. And it's actions like yours that make that work necessary." The words hit Lisa like a wave, making her realize just how far she had strayed from the values she was supposed to uphold. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she looked down, unable to meet Ava's gaze. "But don't worry, Sergeant Hayes," Ava continued, her voice still steady and composed. "Your actions today will be addressed." With that, Ava gathered her things, leaving Lisa standing there in stunned silence. The customers in the coffee shop watched Ava as she left, a quiet sense of admiration in their expressions. They looked at Lisa with a mixture of curiosity and disappointment, as if they were seeing her in a new light, a light that made them question the person they thought they knew. As the door closed behind Ava, Lisa was left alone, feeling exposed and vulnerable. Her thoughts swirled with regret and shame, and she couldn't shake the memory of Ava's calm but firm words. She knew, deep down, that Ava was right. She had let her biases cloud her judgment, and she had treated someone with suspicion and disrespect simply because she didn't know who they were. In the days that followed, Lisa's actions became the talk of the town. Word of the incident spread quickly, and soon, people were discussing what had happened in nearly every corner of Maplewood. The story of the local officer who had questioned a state senator spread like wildfire, and before long, it reached the ears of Ava's colleagues, local officials, and even the media. The headline made it clear. A small-town officer had questioned a state senator, treating her with unnecessary suspicion, and now there were consequences to be faced. The incident opened up discussions about the role of bias in law enforcement, the importance of treating people with respect regardless of who they were, and the responsibility officers had to be fair and just in their work. Lisa's superiors took the incident seriously. They understood that actions like hers could harm the reputation of their department and weaken the trust between the police and the community. An investigation was launched to review the details of what had happened, and Lisa was called in for questioning. She was asked to explain her actions, to describe what had led her to treat Senator Ava King with such suspicion. As she sat in the small, quiet office, facing her superiors, Lisa felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She tried to explain herself, to describe how she had thought she was just doing her job, but as she spoke, she realized that her words sounded empty, even to her own ears. Her superiors listened patiently, but their expressions remained serious, their eyes filled with a quiet disappointment. The investigation was thorough, examining every detail, every choice Lisa had made that day. Her actions were reviewed and questioned, and she was reminded of the values that her badge represented, the values she had failed to uphold. Each question her superiors asked forced her to confront the reality of what she had done, and with each answer, she felt the weight of her mistake growing heavier. As the investigation continued, the story gained even more attention, reaching people far beyond Maplewood. News outlets picked up on the incident, sparking debates about bias in law enforcement and the need for officers to approach each person they meet with fairness and respect. Commentators discussed the importance of recognizing one's own biases and the impact that even small actions could have on people's lives. Community leaders spoke out, emphasizing the importance of building trust between law enforcement and the people they served. They highlighted the fact that every interaction mattered, that each officer had a responsibility to treat people with dignity and kindness. They called for greater awareness, for officers to be mindful of their actions, to remember that respect was something every person deserved, regardless of their position or appearance. In Maplewood, the residents were divided in their opinions about Lisa. Some felt sympathy for her, believing that she had simply made a mistake, that she had misjudged the situation. They argued that she was only human, that everyone made mistakes, and that she deserved a chance to make things right. But others felt differently. They believed that, as an officer, Lisa held a special responsibility to act fairly and without bias. They argued that her position required her to be more mindful, to rise above personal assumptions, and treat everyone equally. For them, the incident was a reminder that biases, even unintentional ones, could lead to harm and disrespect. As the investigation drew to a close, the department announced that Lisa would face disciplinary action. It was decided that she would undergo additional training focused on bias awareness, empathy, and fair treatment. Her supervisors wanted her to understand the importance of her role, to see the impact her actions had on the community, and to learn from her mistakes. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some felt that the punishment was fair, a necessary step to ensure that officers were held accountable for their actions. Others felt it wasn't enough, that Lisa should have faced harsher consequences. But regardless of the public's opinion, Lisa knew that this was her chance to learn, to grow, and to prove that she could be better. In the weeks that followed, Lisa attended the training sessions, listening carefully as instructors spoke about the impact of bias, the importance of empathy, and the role of respect in law enforcement. She learned about the experiences of people who had faced discrimination, people who had been unfairly judged or treated differently because of their appearance, their background, or their position. She listened to their stories, feeling a deep sense of regret as she realized how her actions had mirrored some of the very behaviors they described. The training was eye-opening for Lisa. She began to see how her own assumptions had influenced her actions, how her desire to spot trouble had led her to see suspicion where there was none. She realized that she had let her pride and her authority cloud her judgment, and she promised herself that she would do better, that she would be more mindful, more respectful, and more aware. Meanwhile, Ava King continued her work, using the experience to fuel her commitment to bringing justice and fairness to her state. She spoke at events, shared her story with others, and emphasized the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of who they were. Her story inspired many, serving as a reminder that even those in positions of power could be treated unfairly, and that everyone, from ordinary citizens to officers of the law, had a role to play in creating a more just society. In time, the incident faded from the headlines, but the lessons it had sparked continued to resonate in Maplewood and beyond. People remembered the day when Senator Ava King stood up for herself, when she reminded an officer of the importance of respect, and when she showed the town that justice wasn't just a word. It was a way of treating people, a commitment to fairness, a belief that everyone deserved to be seen and valued. For Lisa, the experience remained a turning point in her career. She approached her work with a new perspective, remembering Ava's words and striving to treat each person she encountered with the respect they deserved. She knew she could never erase what had happened, but she could learn from it, grow from it, and use it as a guide to become the officer she was meant to be. And in the quiet town of Maplewood, people carried forward the memory of that day, knowing that true justice began with simple respect and the willingness to see others as they truly were, not as strangers, but as people deserving of dignity, understanding, and fairness. As Ava walked out of the coffee shop that day, her head held high. She left an impact that went far beyond the small room she had just exited. Each step she took down the street was firm, her posture strong and upright, reflecting a sense of purpose and conviction. Ava wasn't just leaving behind a situation that could have been a personal insult. She was leaving a powerful message for everyone who had witnessed it. Inside the coffee shop, the crowd slowly returned to their own lives, but a quiet sense of reflection filled the air. Those who had seen the encounter between Ava and Lisa felt something new and profound. Many of them thought about Ava's final words, her reminder to never judge by appearances. They had witnessed an unexpected twist, a quiet woman who, in the end, carried far more power and wisdom than anyone had initially realized. People began murmuring to each other, sharing looks of wonder and respect as they reflected on what had just happened. Ava's words lingered in their minds. Never judge by appearances, because sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the most strength, and for those who abuse their power, they're the ones who never see it coming. As she walked down the street, Ava thought about the events that had unfolded. She knew that, in a way, she had done more than stand up for herself. She had become an example, a reminder to everyone watching that strength doesn't always come in the loudest or most visible form. True strength, she believed, was found in patience, in kindness, and in respect, for others and for oneself. Ava's life had taught her many things about humility and understanding. She had not risen to the position of senator overnight. She had worked hard, faced many challenges, and along the way, she had learned that respect was not just something to be demanded. It was something that had to be earned through actions, through integrity, and through a commitment to justice. And respect, she knew, was a two-way street. To be respected, one had to show respect to others. As she continued down the street, she thought back to her earlier days, long before she had become a senator. She remembered a time when she was just starting out, full of hope and determination, yet often overlooked by those around her. She had been quiet, careful, and observant, preferring to let her work speak for her rather than trying to stand out. Many people hadn't taken her seriously back then, just as Officer Lisa hadn't today. But Ava had learned that, in the end, it was not about being seen. It was about making a difference. She thought about all the people she had met along her journey, people from every walk of life, each with their own story, each deserving of respect. She thought of the kindness she had received from strangers, the mentors who had guided her, and the friends who had supported her. And she thought of the times when she, too, had been judged unfairly, when others had made assumptions about her because of her quiet demeanor or her simple appearance. It was experiences like these that had shaped Ava's beliefs and values. She had learned the importance of looking deeper, of seeing people for who they truly were rather than who they appeared to be. She understood that every person had a story, a background, and a unique journey, and she believed it was her duty, as a leader, to remember that and to treat each person she met with the dignity they deserved. As she walked, she noticed the people passing by, each one different, each one unique. She saw parents with their children, friends laughing together, and people going about their day. Ava smiled to herself, knowing that every person she passed had their own challenges, their own dreams, and their own strength. She believed that everyone, no matter their position or status, had something valuable to offer to the world. And yet she also knew that respect was not always given equally. Too often, people judged others by appearances, by assumptions, or by stereotypes. Too often, people in positions of authority, like Officer Lisa, assumed they knew someone's story without taking the time to truly understand them. Ava knew that these judgments were not only unfair, they were also harmful. They created barriers, fueled misunderstandings, and prevented people from connecting on a deeper, more meaningful level. As she thought about this, Ava felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was more determined than ever to continue her work, to advocate for fairness, justice, and equality. She wanted to create a world where people were judged not by their appearance, but by their character and actions. She wanted to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, felt seen, valued, and respected. Ava knew that change would not come easily. There were still many people who held biases, who judged others based on appearances or preconceived notions. But she believed that change was possible, one step at a time. She believed in the power of setting an example, of leading with kindness and understanding. And she knew that by staying true to her values, she could inspire others to do the same. As she walked, Ava thought about Officer Lisa. She hoped that Lisa, too, would take something valuable away from this experience. Ava knew that Lisa's actions had been influenced by assumptions, by biases that perhaps she hadn't even been fully aware of. But Ava also believed in forgiveness, in giving people the chance to learn and grow. Ava hoped that Lisa would reflect on what had happened, that she would take the time to understand her own actions and the impact they had on others. She hoped that Lisa would become more mindful, more respectful, and more aware of the power and responsibility that came with her position, and Ava hoped that, in the future, Lisa would approach her work with a renewed sense of humility and understanding. As Ava reached the end of the street, she took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that the path she had chosen was not an easy one, but it was one she was proud of. She believed in the work she was doing, in the message she was spreading, and in the difference she was making. And she knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would continue to stand up for what she believed in. Ava's experience in the coffee shop that day would stay with her as a reminder of the importance of her mission. It would remind her of the work that still needed to be done, of the need to break down barriers and build a society based on respect and equality. And it would remind her that true strength came not from power or authority, but from kindness, humility, and the courage to stand up for what was right. As she walked away, her head held high, Ava felt a deep sense of purpose. She knew that she had left a lasting impact, not only on Officer Lisa, but on everyone who had witnessed the encounter. She had shown them that strength could be quiet, that respect was something to be earned, and that true power lay in treating others with dignity. Ava's words would continue to echo in the minds of those who had heard them, serving as a reminder to never judge by appearances. They would remind people that every person they met had a story, a journey, and a unique strength. And they would encourage people to look beyond the surface, to see each person for who they truly were. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, Ava continued her work with renewed dedication. She met with community leaders, spoke at events, and advocated for policies that promoted fairness and respect. Her message resonated with people from all walks of life, inspiring them to reflect on their own actions, to challenge their assumptions, and to treat others with kindness and understanding. And as she traveled from town to town, she carried with her the memory of that day in the coffee shop. It served as a constant reminder of the importance of her mission, of the impact that even the smallest actions could have on others. It reminded her that, in a world where so many people were quick to judge, there was a need for voices like hers, a need for people who believed in the power of empathy, in the strength of kindness, and in the value of respect. In the end, Ava's journey was not just about herself. It was about creating a world where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. It was about building a society where people were not judged by appearances, but were recognized for their character, their actions, and their contributions. And it was about reminding people that true strength came from within, from the courage to treat others with compassion and the wisdom to see beyond the surface. Ava knew that there would always be challenges, that there would always be people who judged others unfairly. But she also knew that change was possible, that each person had the power to make a difference. And as she continued her work, she held on to the belief that, one day, her message would reach even those who needed it most. As Ava walked into her next meeting, her head held high, she carried with her the memory of the people she had met, the lessons she had learned, and the impact she hoped to make. She was more determined than ever to continue her journey, to stand up for what she believed in, and to inspire others to do the same. And with each step, each word, and each action, she knew that she was making a difference that would one day create a world where everyone was treated with the respect they deserved.